Welcome back to The Uncensored Voice. This is Randolph Macias, your host. Today's guest is Michael Berlanga, businessman and CPA, who almost joined seminary, but later on in life became elected in the Christian Chamber as president. And his political background includes a run for Texas House 117 as a Republican candidate in the November 2018 election, with Governor Abbott's endorsement, I might add, who now seeks Texas Comptroller of Public Accounts office as an independent in the upcoming election against the current incumbent Glenn Hager. Welcome to the show, Mike.
Thank you very much.
So give us a brief bio. Tell us a little bit about yourself, your connections to the Alamo City, and how it came to be that you call San Antonio home.
Well, I'm San Antonio, born, raised, and educated, and I'm very proud to come from those roots. My parents were the sons and daughters of immigrants from Mexico. So though it may not be easy to pronounce, it's actually Berlanga, not just Berlanga for those who don't trill their R's. I don't. But you mentioned seminary. Before my 8th grade year, I went to the seminary for a workshop, and as most Catholic boys, privileged to wonder if they have a calling to be a priest. I found myself looking for that calling, but it was God's plan, I guess, that for the unexpected death of my father. He died of a stroke that fall, and so I made a deal with God. I said, if you want me to be a priest, you wouldn't let me get a scholarship to Central Catholic. So I got a scholarship to Central, and in concern for my mother, having raising 7 of us at the time, I got out of high school as fast as I could. I finished Central Catholic in 3 years, and I was blessed to get a full scholarship to St. Mary's University, where I studied accounting. And from there, I also graduated in 3 years and went on to UTSA, go Roadrunners, at a time when it was a commuter school. But I got a master's in accounting with a concentration in tax. So since that time, I've been involved in helping people with IRS matters, and in the last 6 years, even more intensely, property tax matters. So taxes are my passion, and taxpayers are my concern.
Thank you for that. I really appreciate that. That gives us a little perspective as to your background. And so the issue of property taxes in Texas has become a topic that has been dominating statewide media, county, and local conversation. So much so, that you have received multiple invitations to speak with regional groups about property tax issues and how it goes beyond a partisan issue, both for business and homestead tax appraisals and the percentage at which they are taxed. My question is, how is the current incumbent addressing this issue, and is it an issue that will require some attention in order to move and stimulate the Texas economy in an efficient manner?
Well, I appreciate the question. I think the answer is in the silence. If you Google the current Comptroller's website, not so much the Comptroller itself, but he is an individual politician. Having been a legislator prior to being the current Comptroller for 8 years, there's nothing on record with him being outspoken. Truly outspoken, such as he could be. He should be, I believe, the lobbyist on behalf of the Texas taxpayers to the legislature. He submits a budget for which the legislature has only one responsibility, and that's to pass a 2-year budget every session. And yet, nowhere in his history has he shown the proclivity that I've shown, and that is to, at the very least, make the process easier. And come April 1st, everybody in Texas that owns property is going to get a property value notice of value. I've been putting on seminars for 6 years, supported by everything from local city council people to school board trustees to county judges and commissioners' courts. And I've been from here to El Paso and Midland and a few places in between. But the further I go, the more I know the issue's the same. The process is broken, the process is difficult to understand, and the rights of the taxpayers are not easily understood, and he's not leading any kind of educational capacity to expand or empower the Texas taxpayers.
So Article 7 of the Texas Constitution requires a report to the legislature on the efficiency in state spending. Am I correct?
That's absolutely correct.
So my second question after that was pretty much, you may have already answered it, is what are the primary and single most important duties of the office of the Texas Comptroller of Public Accounts? I guess we answered that question already in great detail.
Well, we talked about the opportunity more so than we talked about the obligation. And I think that's what's lost on any tax collector in any county. In this case, what is perceived as the chief tax collector for the state of Texas. Now, what's misleading is to suggest, as most Texas legislators have done, that we do not have a property tax. when in fact the state of Texas created a school district system over 100 years ago to tax property directly, which then reduces the burden on the state's budget for the state's responsibility under Article 7, as you referenced, to fund the public education system efficiently. It's the duty of the legislature, per that same Article 7 of the Constitution, to fund public education efficiently. And I would suggest that a study be done that would easily conclude, pre and post-COVID, that 1,250 school districts aren't essential to fund public education. But there is no current study. There is no current staff of economists looking forward to answering the question, if we eliminate school property tax and were to broaden the base of state sales tax, which includes tourists and other transients that come into the state and visit, leave their money here, why would that not be a better alternative if we're truly committed to affordable home ownership? And I'm not talking about just on the lower socioeconomic scale. I'm also speaking to the seniors and the veterans who have to seek protection from exemptions. But the message is across the board. Property taxes are the biggest burden and obstacle to home ownership. And home ownership is core stability in any community. But I'll defer to the rest of your questions maybe to be more specific.
No problem. Thank you for that answer. I appreciate that. So the fact remains that the appraisal of property taxes are rising, and the average property tax rate, according to my own personal research, was approximately 1.81%. Texas has the highest property tax rate in the nation, with the exception of 13 states being higher. Why do you think that is?
Because Texas hasn't committed to ending wealth discrimination in the public school system, efficiently funding public education with fewer school districts that were representative of either the people or the geography. And the history is this, you may know, there's 254 counties, and they're all, if you notice, primarily rectangles. Well, back in the days of our founding fathers, that was created so that it would take a day's horseback ride to the county line from the county seat to record any instruments that were essential to tracking what we were doing and putting it on public record. So that was how we came up with the geography of counties. But it wasn't until 100 years ago that we created a school district system, because in my opinion, the state of Texas wanted to abdicate, under the popular expression of local control, the ability for communities before there was the civil rights laws that enabled us to have fair housing, that was then had to be followed up with fair credit, so that everybody would have the American dream, regardless of race, origin, religion. Anybody should be able to live anywhere in the state of Texas, and they should also be entitled to getting an education for their children. And it should not be on the basis of where they're at, the quality of the education and the financing of that education. So my issue is when are we going to have fair education? And fair education starts with the state. It doesn't start by separating the wealthy from the less wealthy. It doesn't get band-aided with a recapture, aka Robin Hood system, where we take from the wealthy and give to the lower school districts. I mean, we shouldn't even be dealing with this kind of nonsense. There is no Republican or Democrat that can answer to that question other than it's always been that way. And I say the time is now for it no longer to be that way. If we've learned anything from COVID, it's that we can efficiently deliver education, and I'm not suggesting that we should do this solely through the technology that's now affordable and available. But how can we look back only 2 years ago and say, we can tell all the kids to stay home, but we can still give them a diploma without an asterisk, and then a year later, flip the coin and give them options. And today, we tell them they need to come to school, but they should wear a mask. But if it's too cold, we're going to tell them to stay home. I mean, if there isn't a better time to respect Article 7 about funding public education efficiently, which is the duty of the legislature, then when will it be? And I think right now the opportunity to replace the comptroller with somebody like myself, or specifically myself, to be that voice, that constant voice that speaks to the governor weekly about we can do better is timely. And that's why I'm running.
Thank you for that answer, Mike. I really appreciate that. That would lead me on into my next question as far as ISDs go. According to what I've researched, it looks like there's 1,250 ISDs in Texas for all 254 counties in the great state of Texas, with the city of Houston having one school district, and in contrast, the city of San Antonio having 17. Why is there such a variance with the largest city in Texas having one school district and the city similar, a little lower in population, but having San Antonio has 17? What?
In my opinion, it's abdication of leadership. And this goes back, as I said, back to 1968. Rodriguez sued the San Antonio Independent School District under the cause of action that there was wealth discrimination taking place. He took it all the way to the Supreme Court in 1973. In the dissenting opinion, Thurgood Marshall essentially said, I don't agree that though the Constitution of the federal government under the 14th Amendment doesn't protect the right to an education, that we should ignore the fact that there is wealth discrimination going on. But nonetheless, it was kicked back down to the states, and the states then took it up with the Edgewood versus state of Texas case. It's been made famous by the Band-Aid of the recapture tax, the alleged Robin Hood system of taking from the wealthy school districts and giving to the poor. But in answer specifically to your question, at that opportunity, really what should have been considered then and should definitely be considered now is why are we still having this 1,250 school districts? You mentioned Bexar County. We're the poster child. We have the history of wealth discrimination. Both sides run on the basis of protecting local control versus proliferating corruption. They don't say they proliferate corruption, but I think it's corrupt that we have 17 school districts and we only have 10 state representatives. Now, in response to saying we have too many, then the defense usually from legislators is, well, we have too few in Houston. And I agree. And Governor Abbott's on record and many other elected officials on record that represent that county, that public school system is failing in its outcome to produce an adequate academic result. And no one is asking, why is that not broken up? If local control is the mantra in Bexar County, where we have 17 school districts when we perhaps should only have 10, and that 10 should be equivalent to the gerrymandering that went on to create an allocation of population evenly divided among 10 state representatives, then why don't we have the same standard or protocol in Houston? And perhaps instead of pointing at Houston and saying y'all are not producing an outcome because you don't have sufficient administration, and then looking at Bexar County and saying, well, we'll just look the other way. It's always been this way, and we're going to go around and visit all these different school districts. When is the leadership of the state going to say enough is enough? We don't need this many school districts, and we are responsible for funding education primarily, not indirectly through a property tax at the school board level that I might echo is exaggerated because the values that are beefed up because of property value studies that are brought upon us by the state comptroller.
So what I got from your answer is there needs to be a model somehow created. I don't know if it has to be by statute or if it has to be by constitutional amendment to where there is a sufficient amount of school districts, say in the largest city in Texas, Houston, having one is too small, and San Antonio having 17 is too much. Is there a way to, do you think that would have to be passed by statute? I mean, is there like a way we could address that?
Absolutely. I mean, we can look back to what drew me into partisan politics at the state level in the first place. It was a decade ago that I saw how San Antonio, owning the San Antonio water system, by legislative authority took over Bear Met. So this water district was taken essentially out of existence and handed over to SAWS. So if we have the authority to end a water district at the state level, the state created the school districts. The school districts didn't create the state. And that's what's lost on what is basically the government of education wagging the dog of the authority found in the elected officials at the statewide level, who then oversee the state representatives, representative of the population, and state senators representative of a smaller subset of the population. So to answer your question more specifically, we could follow the lines of state representative districts. For whatever rationale was used other than math, why aren't the students allocated the same way? It's from the state that we have a budget that is supposed to fund public education. If we're not going to respect that the state has that primary responsibility, then to suggest that the school districts are in charge is an abdication of leadership. It's an abdication of responsibility.
And it seems like the independent school districts seem to be their own political, subdivision that is independent and have elected officials, and there's been a lot of controversy with mask mandates, and going back to COVID-19, it affects everything. But getting back to the property tax issue, my next question was going to be, what is the connection with the ISDs, the municipal sales tax, and the property taxes? What's the common denominator?
Well, the common denominator will stay focused within the total property tax. The majority of your property taxes to fund school districts. Okay. More than 50%, no matter where I go, is funding school districts. And it's those same school districts that, as you say, are used as a redirect of responsibility. I mean, over and over again, you hear about state elected officials blaming the school districts. We only have to go back 100 years to realize the state created the school districts. I mean, what did our parents say? I brought you into this world, I can take you out. And of course, they were saying it with love. But I don't hear that. I don't hear that when directed at whether it's the abuse of the freedom of speech in the Round Rock Independent School District by a pastor just questioning such conversation as mask mandates. I don't hear it when we have a South San Independent School District Board of Trustees who's missed 5 meetings in a row, but yet can find time to go to Galveston for some seminar for the same alleged duty. I don't find it when we find corruption clearly disclosed and arrests being made for the misuse of the funds directed to the kids, if you will. It's always for the kids, but somehow we keep finding corruption and we don't question that maybe there's a better way. And so I have to come back to why I'm running for this office, because there is nobody currently that can look back on their history that is still possibly can be elected to a statewide office that'll say enough is enough. And I think these people need some help, and they need help from somebody that maybe has the occupational and passionate background to question the status quo. All we've done is kick the can down the road. We keep blaming the school districts, but we don't want to restructure them. We don't want to make them more accountable, whether it's to financial efficiency or to outcome, academic outcome.
That pretty much says it all. Thank you for that. Now, the process, okay, you're running as independent. So yes. According to, state law, state statute, or the process of how that happens, you have to collect, your goal is 100,000 signatures. And this, I believe you said, was based on gubernatorial election voter turnout?
The previous gubernatorial election turnout, under the law, dictates a 5% of that turnout being the minimum that I need to get a petition signed by non-primary voters. It's really interesting to note that the legislature passed a law that said if you're an independent, you don't choose to run through a primary, that the only people can sign up for you to be on the ballot have to be independent voters, meaning voters who did not vote in primaries. Now, the good news for me is that with such a low voter participation in this particular session at approximately less than 20%, for every primary voter that hears this, if they hear my message and they agree with this message, they can go circulate the petition to the 4 out of 5 of their neighbors that are registered voters that haven't voted in a primary. But it's a 2-step process. The Secretary of State has accepted my notice of intent to run, has outlined it very clearly, that beginning after the primary, I could go out and seek the signatures on a petition. Our goal in 100 days is to get 100,000 signatures. We think that's more than doable. And all we have to do is look to 2 real quick resources. The first one on social media that I point to is what Russell Bennett has done with Eliminate Property Tax. and having attracted 17,000 people to that one phrase, eliminate property tax. So if those people want to get behind the effort to get somebody who is a true voice for Texas taxpayers and has truly put himself out there and travels the state to educate Texas taxpayers, then Russell Bennett will enable his following to go get 100,000 signatures. But notwithstanding that group and all its possible momentum they can create, you can also look to simply the Proposition 2 on the ballot, excuse me, where Republicans overwhelmingly voted that they wanted to eliminate property tax over 10 years without replacing it with an income tax. So we have the facts are there. The voters are out there to sign a petition, and then come June 23rd, we'll know if we're on the ballot to make history. It should be noted, this will only be the third time somebody's petitioned their way to the ballot. I like to say by petition and prayer, but this is mathematically so doable, it's just a matter of people responding to this message. But if that should happen, and then if we are successful in November in getting elected, that will make state history. No one has ever done this. But you can see why it's rarely attempted and has not been accomplished. Because we've already asked everybody to identify as Republicans and Democrats. Unfortunately, only 20% of the population has. So therefore, if only 20% of the population has, that leaves 80% left to say, is there an alternative? And I think we represent that alternative.
As I recall, there was a gubernatorial candidate who made eliminating property taxes a big deal and really rallied the troops as to how he was going to do that. And he didn't do very well in the gubernatorial election. But so the difference between him and yourself is you have the credentials. You have a CPA, you know how to manage finances, and you can get it done. So I'm hoping that anybody who didn't vote in the primary will hear the message and see that clearly you have what it takes to be the next Texas Comptroller and run it in a very efficient and competent manner as opposed to the incumbent who's up for re-election. So do you think that eliminating property taxes is a goal that can be achieved in the mold of the Texas Constitution requiring that we keep our fiscal spending, in one word, efficient?
Absolutely. I don't think it's just doable. I think it's incumbent upon us. At this point, being a professional in real estate, having a brother who is the former president of the Greater San Antonio Builders Association, and having spoken across the state to audiences without a political motivation. This is strictly to inform, inspire, and empower those in attendance. I will tell you that home ownership is becoming burdened to the point that is also, even for those who want to move into the state, they're becoming more aware, as you said earlier. We're, of the non-income tax states in the country, we have the largest property tax burden, and that is unacceptable. We shouldn't be bragging about that. I love Texas, and I love everything about Texas. And everybody says, well, so goes Texas, so goes the nation. Well, why can't Texas go in the way of restoring your rights to home ownership, your rights to property ownership that is not burdened by a wealth discriminatory, inefficient public school funding system? Why can't we make that the responsibility of all Texans and make more Texans aware of their participation in this property tax system? Many are not aware that if you lease your space for office use and pay the taxes, you have the right to protest the value even though you're not on record the property owner. That's the property tax code. I can't tell you the number of people whose eyes have gotten big, and that's in the commercial real estate sector. But the residential tenant, if they knew, if it was just required by law that the landlord disclose to them that taxes could be harmful to their wealth, I mean, just like we did with the Surgeon General's warning, then maybe if they knew what percentage of their rent was going to taxes, maybe those apartment owners would take up this mantra so that they one day might find the stability in home ownership. Currently, we don't have that. We don't have an informed populace. We don't have informed constituents. They don't even know how to protest their values, such as reflected by the fact that more than 80% of the population doesn't protest their value.
Thank you for that. And my personal experience when I was doing some block walking for a campaign recently, I wanted to let our viewers know, and of course you as well. I had a gentleman that had a food truck outside he was constructing, and he's running into hard times. He said, I can't afford the taxes on my home anymore. It's like I have it paid off, but I'm still paying taxes. It's like I'm leasing my house still, even though I paid it off. He said, I'm eventually going to move out of this house, and I'm just going to live in an RV and pay rent there or whatever, however. He was very frustrated, and he made it a point that he is going to be moving out of his house because the tax burden is so great on him. He can't stand it anymore, and it's really sad to hear people like that, boots on the ground while you're standing at their doorstep hearing stuff like this, that they actually are willing to move out of their homes because they can't afford the taxes anymore. And so I'm hoping that with your model of how you wish to do that will make a difference and make home ownership something to be achieved and hopefully be happy in their home for the rest of their life without an undue tax burden, or hopefully not even a property tax burden at all, with the right plan in place.
Well, to quote Lieutenant Governor Patrick when he spoke to the state convention of realtors, I agree with him. We want everybody's values in Texas to go up. We just don't want to tax them every year along the way out of their opportunity to take advantage of that appreciation, to take advantage of that commitment to a neighborhood or to a homestead or to a shelter for not only their kids but their grandchildren. So this is perhaps going to awaken the senior community, and not with the nominal appetizer of a small exemption and just the political rhetoric that, oh, we're going to do something for the seniors. I'm 62. My mother passed away at 99. I'm going to be a senior for a long time, and I don't have that kind of time to wait. I don't have a tenure to wait. This office would give me 4 years, and if I can't get something done substantially in 4 years, I won't run for re-election, because there's no basis for being involved in politics and more importantly in elected leadership if you're not making something happen. I think Roosevelt said it best. I'd rather attempt to do something great and fail than attempt to do nothing and succeed. But I'm tired of watching people do nothing and succeed. And they're succeeding in kicking the can down the road of this conversation while gaining name recognition, which is what gets them reelected. It's not about new ideas. It's not about, can we do this differently? Given everything we've learned, given everything we've endured, from COVID to Snowvid, we're not doing it. Let's just admit it. And let's admit that if we have one last chance to put somebody like myself, but specifically, put me in a position where we can have this conversation on a regular basis, I look forward to assisting Governor Greg Abbott. I'm not here to antagonize solely for the sake of just having a debate. I'm here to provide a solution, which is what I do in my business. I'm brought in to provide solutions to problems that were already created, whether it's as a CPA or whether it's as a taxpayer representative, whether it's in front of the IRS or whether it's in front of the County Appraisal District. But after 6 years of intense study and surveys and seminars, all I know is that we're not addressing this issue. We have no ongoing study. We have no plans for a special session. We don't have to wait for next spring to do this. But only because we've not exhibited the political will to make this the priority of conversation, to stare down the government of education by the state government that created it, are we missing the opportunity right now to make a difference. And right now what we're going to need to do is get 100,000 signatures on a petition to enable the voters in November to have a choice. We're not obligating them to vote for me. You want more answers? Let's get more signatures. Because with those signatures will bring us an opportunity for an answer that is not Democrat and is not Republican. Because in the words of John F. Kennedy, we're not seeking a Democrat or Republican answer. We're seeking the best answer. We do not have that answer out there in the voice of somebody who has to be heard or should be heard because he holds a statewide office.
So, in light of what you just said, all the answers that you gave me are hopefully will educate the viewer as to what needs to be done, because it affects all Texans on both sides of the aisle. So what is your message to those voters that didn't vote in the primary? Because those types of voters tend to be a little apathetic because they just don't want to vote. Maybe they'll vote in the general, or maybe they'll not vote in the primary, or maybe they won't vote at all. What is your message to them as far as how it affects them with the office that you're seeking?
Well, I know this much, and I'm on record as saying that no party can represent the majority, simple majority of the population. They may have been elected, but any Gallup poll will tell you every month, whether it's 28% Republican, 32% Democrat, but neither party represents the simple majority by identity. People do not identify as Republicans or Democrats to the simple majority of the population. But the simple majority of the population, more than simple majority of the population, according to Gallup polls, will suggest that we identify as Christians. So I would challenge anybody who would lend themselves to that identity to consider that it's scriptural. We have scriptural authority. Jesus said, pay to Caesar what is Caesar's, God what is God's. Caesar's dead. So therefore, it allows us in this democracy to elect people to change the rules of, quote, Caesar. We are Texas. We're not beholden to King Texas. There is no King of Texas. And I say that not just to speak to those who are Christians. I've been in the mosque on Holy Day. I've been to the temple where the Sikhs are. And they share the same inspiration that their Muslim property tax, their Jewish property tax, their agnostic property tax is no lower than my Christian property tax. It's the one message that unites us while allowing us the freedom to choose to worship wherever we will, to choose however we find peace. But I think the best thing we can do is respect the peace that we find in our homes, the peace that we find with our families, the peace that we find with the stability of knowing that if I invest in a home, invest in a neighborhood, that I've got some stability to my death. And I have that benefit to also pass on to my children. I don't need for any other reason than that to say, follow the movement, help us get the signatures, continue to realize that we're loving our neighbors, we love ourselves. And that is the second greatest commandment that my Lord and Savior gave me. But I don't have to bring you to Christ to bring you to taxes. We'll leave that conversation for another time.
Absolutely. And so how can one assist in your efforts to get these signatures?
Well, first of all, thank you for doing this, because in the next few days we're going to open up our Facebook page, we're going to open up our website, and we're going to hopefully have a 1, 2, 3 methodology of clicking a button so that you can download the petition and either sign it, circulate it, and then send it back to us. Remember, you can sign it or you can sign it with other members of the family and nearby relatives and friends and neighbors, or you can circulate it even to larger groups at your place of business. This is not an obligation to vote for me. I want to make that perfectly clear. But it's an opportunity to create an alternative to a Republican and a Democrat conversation about who should be the chief financial advisor of the 9th largest economy in the state of Texas. So the petition is promulgated by the Secretary of State. We're going to have supplemental instructions so that you can offer us the option of being able to keep you aware through email or phone how we're progressing, so that as you get engaged, you may find that you have a new way to get more people engaged. But should we reach our goal, hopefully long before June 23rd, which is our deadline, again, we will be part of making history in Texas. And it's a kind of history that I don't think any of us will apologize for, or we can be nothing more than proud that we further the debate. Because as of now, there is no debate going on between the candidates for Comptroller as to how we're going to reduce our property tax burden, how we're going to restore stability of family and home, how we're going to lengthen the opportunity for businesses to survive because they don't have to overcome a tax that so far nobody's advanced any true commitment to ending as soon as possible.
So that answers a lot. So thank you for the information that you're putting out to the general public about there is an alternative on how to solve this problem. And with that, I'll say to my viewers, thank you for watching, and may God bless America and the great state of Texas. Thank you for your time, Mike.
Thank you.